Hey there, Drowsy Historian here. Tonight you're not a king, you're not a tycoon, you're not even one of the engineers with a clipboard and a pension. You're something much humbler. You're a labourer, a disposable body in someone else's dream of progress. You've travelled thousands of miles to sweat, bleed and rot in the steaming gut of a jungle that has absolutely no interest in letting you live. Your name won't appear on any plaque. Your grave, if you get one, will be shallow and numbered. You won't be remembered as a builder of history, just one more man swallowed by mud, mosquitoes, and misplaced ambition. So before the fever sets in, the sun scorches another layer off your skin, and the dynamite crew forgets where you're standing. Do me a favour. Leave a comment telling me where you're listening from and what time it is for you. If you'd like ad-free audio of these episodes, early access, or just want to support the channel, you can find the Patreon link in the description. But for now, lie back, get comfortable, and try not to imagine the heat. Let's begin. It starts, as these things often do, with a letter, folded crisp and official looking, maybe passed to you by a recruiter in a coat far too nice for the neighbourhood he's in. Or maybe it's nailed to a board at the port, fluttering in the breeze like an invitation to fortune. Labourers wanted for grand engineering project in the tropics, it declares, with promises of steady pay, regular meals, and the kind of adventure that makes men out of nobodies. You're told there's glory in it, that you'll be part of something monumental, a canal connecting oceans, a feat of modern civilization, the very backbone of global progress. And it's hiring. You don't ask why the position is open. You don't ask what happened to the last 100 men who held the job. What matters is that you're not exactly swatting away options. Maybe you're standing ankle deep in factory runoff outside of Liverpool. Maybe you're dodging creditors in New Orleans. Maybe you've just stepped off a sugar plantation in Barbados, looking for something, anything, that doesn't involve another season of cane and sunstroke. The poster says you'll be paid in gold coin. You don't even own a pair of boots that aren't falling apart, but gold coin sounds like a future you might survive into. You take the letter. The journey itself is enough to make you rethink things. You're crammed into a passenger ship that smells like old bread, sweat, and anxious silence. The food is indistinguishable from the plates it's served on. The rats are better fed than you are, and the sea air is only refreshing if you're lucky enough not to be downwind from the latrine buckets. Somewhere around day 6, a man coughs blood on the pillow next to yours. No one takes him below. No one takes his place either. That pillow just stays red until you dock. When land finally appears on the horizon, you expect fanfare, or at least something hopeful. But the coast that greets you is a tangle of browning jungle and rusting port equipment, half eclipsed by thick mist and black smoke that trails from fires inland. You squint and try to find the paradise the letter mentioned. There are no palm trees swaying cheerfully, no white sand beaches, just the slow, slouching crawl of progress in the form of mud-choked wagons and men in too small hats swearing at broken pulleys. You're herded down the gangplank with a dozen other hopefuls, none of whom are talking now. The recruiter who greets you doesn't smile. He doesn't explain anything either. He checks your name against a list, grunts something about black crew housing, and points inland. The heat hits you like a wall as soon as you leave the pier. Not warmth, heat. Oppressive, personal heat. It doesn't just touch your skin, it climbs inside you, behind your eyes, between your ribs. Your shirt is soaked through by the time you've walked 50 yards, and your socks squish in your boots. The camp is a collection of rotting shanties and bent corrugated tin, sagging like they've given up pretending to be buildings. There's a line for water, another for rations, another for registration, though that's mostly just a man handing you a badge with a number on it and telling you which cot is yours. You don't get a bed, you get space, just enough of it to stretch out and wonder what's crawling under your mat. The air inside the shack is worse than outside. Stale, wet, buzzing with flies that aren't even interested in being shooed away. They know you can't do anything about them. That night, you meet your bunkmates, or rather, you hear them. One snores like someone drowning in syrup. Another has a cough that sounds like it's breaking his spine from the inside out. No one says much. No one has the energy. Most have been here a few days already. The one who's been here the longest, 8 days apparently, warns you to keep your boots tied tight while you sleep. Something about rats, or maybe snakes. He's not specific. You decide not to ask. The next morning you wake up to shouting. It's not even dawn. You grab your boots in the dark, kick away something skittering, and follow the line of men trudging toward the main road. Breakfast is a ladle of something greyish and a biscuit that tastes like old brick. Someone tells you it's better to eat it fast. If the flies don't get it, the ants will. A bell rings, and a man with a clipboard barks out job assignments. You're given a number, a location, and a tool. A pickaxe, maybe, or a rusted shovel with splinters the size of your finger. You ask where you're supposed to go. He points to a trail, vanishing into the trees. Just follow the screams, he says. You laugh until you realise he isn't joking. You think about the letter, the one that promised glory. That talked about honour and legacy and joining the march of civilization. You remember how carefully it was folded, how shiny the print looked, how official it seemed. And now, ankle deep in mud, skin already slick with sweat, and stomach sour from whatever passed as food, you realise something that will stick with you through every day you survive in this place. However few that may be, that letter didn't offer you a job, it offered you a slow death, one you had to pay to sail into. The heat doesn't greet you, it attacks. There's no gentle rise in temperature, no gradual adjustment. One moment you're stepping off the ship, the next you're inside something that feels less like air and more like a damp wool blanket someone's wrapped around your head and set on fire. You try to breathe, but the air is thick and unmoving, like it's already been breathed by too many other people. The humidity doesn't just soak your clothes. It climbs into your lungs and settles there like a squatter. You're not sweating through your shirt. You're sweating through your bones. Your boots squelch with each step, and your socks have become sentient. Mosquitoes descend on you before your boots even hit the dock. They bite through socks, through sleeves, through skin you didn't know was exposed. You swat until you bleed, and then keep bleeding. The docks are made of warped planks that creak under every footfall. Some boards missing entirely, others coated in a greasy layer of rot and salt. The smell is unforgettable, a fermenting blend of fish guts, latrine runoff, coal smoke, spilled rum, and something else that defies classification, but definitely has a pulse. Buzzing flies orbit every barrel. Stray dogs fight over a severed chicken foot near the customs shed. Someone sneezes behind you and you instinctively flinch. Not because of disease, but because everyone here already looks half dead, and the other half angry about it. There's no ceremony, no one waiting to welcome you. Just a man with sun-scorched skin and a clipboard, barking names with the enthusiasm of a man counting corpses. You're herded like cattle into groups based on arbitrary categories you don't yet understand. Language maybe, or skin colour, or how close to death you already look. You hear someone mutter the phrase, gold roll, and another snort, silver. You'll learn later that one of those gets bedsheets and ice water, and the other gets a cot in a swamp and a funeral without a name. You can probably guess which one you're in. You start walking inland. There are no real roads, just muddy tracks carved by wagons and flattened by boot traffic. The jungle is immediate, aggressive and uninvited. Vines creep across the trail like fingers testing for weakness. Trees loom over you, branches tangled like webs, leaking sap and insects in equal measure. The air buzzes constantly. Not the pleasant kind of buzz from cicadas on a summer evening. but an ever-present swarm of winged things looking to bite, burrow, or breed in anything warm. You swat at your neck and come away with blood. It isn't even your own. Your group is silent, aside from the occasional cough or stumble. Someone ahead falls in a puddle so deep it nearly swallows their satchel. No one helps him up. The man behind you mutters something in Spanish, spits into the grass and keeps walking. After an hour, your shirt clings to you like it's made of wet parchment. After 2, you've stopped trying to wipe your face. What's the point? There's more moisture in the air than in your canteen, and whatever you're sweating out isn't water anymore. It's hope. By the time you reach the camp, you've started to understand something crucial. The jungle doesn't want you here. Not in the poetic sense, not in the way a mother animal protects its cubs, or a sacred land resents outsiders. This isn't a metaphor. This is war. Every leaf you brush against hides something that stings or poisons. Every inch of ground is either too soft or too hard, never stable. The very air feels weaponized, heavy with mold spores, fever and decay. There are fungi here that grow overnight into the shape of hands, and bugs that can live inside your eyelid. You haven't even been officially hired yet, and the landscape is already filing a complaint against your existence. The camp is a scattered patchwork of buildings that appear to have been assembled by blind men in a hurry. Wood, tin, canvas, and whatever drifted in on the tide. It's all been slapped together into barracks and mess halls and storerooms that sag under the weight of mildew and failure. You're shown your bunk, which is more of a slot, a narrow space between 2 other men who look like they stopped sleeping weeks ago. The mattress smells like wet paper and old fever. The man to your left is missing 2 fingers. The one to your right is missing most of his teeth. No one says hello. You lie down anyway. At dinner, you're handed a bowl of something unidentifiable. It's grey, vaguely warm, and smells like the inside of a boot. Someone tells you it's salt fish and rice. You believe the rice part. The salt fish part seems optimistic. You eat it because you're starving. You regret it immediately, but not enough to stop. Later that night, your stomach gurgles with the slow dread of something going terribly wrong. You lie on your cot, the mosquito net full of holes, and listen to the sounds of men groaning, rats scuttling, and the jungle outside humming with life. You're not sure if you'll sleep, but you're sure something will bite you while you try. That night, as the first distant coughs begin to echo through the dark, you realise the place doesn't feel temporary. It doesn't feel like a work site. It feels like a trap, a holding pen for those the world has quietly decided it can do without. And even though you only arrived this morning, you already feel the jungle tightening around the camp like a noose. You close your eyes and the sweat clings to your back like a second skin. The last thought you have before sleep drags you under is simple, quiet, and unmistakably true. You're not going to make it out of here. It doesn't take long to figure out where you stand. And by stand, of course, I mean where you're allowed to stand, eat, sleep, and relieve yourself. Everything is labelled, explicitly or implicitly, by colour, language, and perceived origin. You've barely unpacked what little you brought when you noticed the signs. Gold roll and silver roll, that's what they call it here. Sounds quaint, like a children's game, or some kind of currency system. It isn't. It's a caste system with paperwork. And it tells you quite plainly that if you're white and English speaking, you get a house with walls. If you're not, you get rot. The Americans didn't invent this system. They simply refined it with industrial efficiency. The French had their own version, of course, but the Americans came in with surveys and census documents and memoranda. They turned prejudice into spreadsheets. You're classified not by your name or your birthplace, but by how close to whiteness someone thinks you might be after 5 seconds of eye contact. Caribbean, black. African, also black. Latin American, depends on your accent and skin tone. Jamaican but educated, still black. You could have been a teacher or a tailor back home, but here you're unskilled labour. Your job title is the same as your coffin label. White engineers, mostly American, get proper homes with screened windows, porches, and ceiling fans. They have ice delivered twice a day. Their sheets are washed. They dine in clean cafeterias where the food arrives on plates instead of ladled from buckets. They drink filtered water and sip lemonade while discussing logistics. You see them sometimes on the hill above the camps, standing in the shade of their imported trees, pointing at blueprints with clean fingers. One of them carries a dog in a basket. You don't have soap. Your camp sits at the bottom of that hill, not just physically, but ideologically. The buildings here are made of warped tin nailed together like an afterthought. You sleep 6 to a shack. No insulation, no windows, no privacy. If it rains, the roof leaks. If it's dry, the dust sticks to your sweat. Every surface feels like it was built to host disease. Latrines are communal, overflowing, and uphill from where you eat. A logistical choice someone made with either ignorance or cruelty, and you're not sure which is worse. The water is untreated. The food is just enough to keep you from collapsing on the job. If you complain, you're told you're lucky to be here, lucky to earn a wage, lucky to be alive. But you're not paid in money. You're paid in tokens, metal scrip only usable at the company store, where prices fluctuate conveniently around payday. Soap costs a day's labour. A pair of socks might take 3. Anything imported, tea, canned meat, tobacco, is priced like gold. Most men go into debt before their second week. The store owns you before the jungle has a chance to bury you. There's a hospital for gold roll workers. It has clean sheets, proper bandages, doctors trained in the States. You've seen it from afar, bright white and surrounded by hedges. Then there's your hospital, a collection of wooden huts with beds made from rope and plywood. Medicine is limited. Sometimes it's just rum and a promise. If you're lucky, you get quinine. If you're not, you get morphine once and a shallow grave after. They don't treat the diseases so much as the symptoms. You go in feverish and come out dead or discharged. Either way, your cot is free by morning. The work crews are divided too. You never see a white man with a shovel unless it's ceremonial. The real labour is done by the silver roll, black West Indians, Afro-Panamanians, southern black Americans, Chinese workers, and indigenous men brought in from places so poor they made this sound appealing. You're given the worst jobs, swinging pickaxes in the cut, clearing swamps, hauling dynamite. It isn't just about strength, it's about expendability. You're more replaceable than the tools they hand you. Even your death is catalogued differently. If a white engineer dies, there's a service, a casket, a photograph sent home. If you die, your name is scratched into a logbook, your body dumped in a pit with 20 others, and a numbered stake hammered into the dirt. Sometimes, not even that. You've heard of men buried still warm, misdiagnosed, or simply inconvenient. You learn quickly that your life here doesn't have value, only volume. Keep the workforce large enough, and no one notices who's missing. There's a saying that floats through camp like smoke. White men make the plans, black men dig the graves. No one laughs when they say it. It isn't a joke, it's just the truth recited out loud, passed along like weather reports and fever symptoms. You don't need a calendar. You can measure time in funerals and skin tone. The men who stay the longest either rise to foreman or fall into silence, neither of which saves them. The caste ladder is nailed in place, and the higher rungs are greased. One evening, you see a young white man escorted past your shack. He's clearly new, clean clothes, fresh shave, walking upright. You nod at him. He doesn't nod back. You're not sure if he sees you, or if he's been instructed not to. Later, you hear he's a junior engineer. He's been given his own bungalow, his own servant, and a weekly supply of American magazines. He'll probably die of malaria within 6 months, but at least he'll die with linens. You lie back on your cot, arms behind your head, staring at the rust-coloured ceiling. You listen to the sounds of 100 men trying not to cough too loudly. You wonder what rung you're on, and whether the ladder ever really touches the ground at all. The word room is generous. It implies some sort of space with boundaries, maybe even dignity. What you have is a box, a sagging, heat-swollen rectangle of tin and timber that smells like boiled shoes and failure. It leans slightly to one side, like it's tired of standing. The door doesn't quite close. The windows don't have glass, just torn mosquito netting stapled around warped frames. Privacy is a fantasy. So is airflow, so is safety. The walls are thin enough to hear every cough, every groan, every whispered prayer, and half-choked scream from the shacks on either side. You are never alone here, not in the way that matters. There are 7 of you in the shack. The floor plan suggests it was built for 3. Cots are pushed so close together that getting out of bed without stepping on someone else requires negotiation. There's a chamber pot in the corner that no one wants to empty, but everyone eventually uses. It fills faster than it gets cleaned. You tell yourself you'll carry it out in the morning. You said the same thing yesterday, and the day before. Now it's just part of the room, a fixture, a low, sloshing monument to shared misery and collective avoidance. The bedding is a mystery, not where it came from. That much is obvious. Someone dragged it in from a mouldy pile, slapped it over rusted bed frames, and called it good enough. No, the mystery is what's in it. It's lumpy in ways that suggest more than just stuffing. You've heard of men waking up with swollen bites or strange shifting rashes. One man claimed a centipede had crawled into his boot during the night, and when he put it on the next morning, it bit him 6 times before he could get it off. You think about that as you tuck your boots under your cot and pull the scratchy sheet over your legs, already damp with sweat. The floorboards creak and groan with every movement, softened from years of leaking roofs and unwashed feet. Some sections are so rotted they feel hollow. One day, you expect someone will step through entirely and vanish into the crawl space below, where the rats and the worst things live. The wood is dark with mildew in the corners, and when it rains, which is most nights, the whole room steams with a kind of warm, fungal damp that settles in your lungs like bad news. You've stopped drying your clothes. There's no point. Nothing stays dry here, not for long. Not your socks, not your skin, not even your bones. Every night, someone coughs. That's how you measure time. The first cough is just after sundown, like a bell. Then another. Then 3 in a row. Sometimes it's one of your bunkmates. Sometimes it's you. Most of the men try to muffle it in their pillows. But it doesn't help. The sound carries. The smell carries too. Sweat, bile, and something sweeter and far more concerning. You learn to identify the scent of fever, the sour burn of someone about to vomit, the unmistakable stench of a man who won't be moving in the morning. Last night, one of the older men on the far cot stopped responding. No one touched him. No one said anything. In the dark, you all just listened. To his breathing, then to the absence of it. You lay still, eyes open, counting the seconds between his last gasp and the realization that he'd joined the long list of forgotten labourers. At dawn, a foreman came by with a clipboard. Didn't say a word. Just poked the body with his boot, made a note, and barked at 2 other men to carry him out. No sheet, no ceremony, just another number in a notebook that will probably be misfiled anyway. You wonder what killed him. Could have been anything. Cholera, maybe. That's going around again. It comes in waves, usually after a good rainfall when the latrines overflow and everything floods. Suddenly everyone's drinking water that tastes just slightly wrong, and within a day or 2, the moaning begins. You've seen men drop weight like meat off a boiled bone, pale, shaking, leaking themselves to death in beds not designed for anyone to stay in that long. You try not to think about it as you fill your canteen each morning, but the metallic taste lingers. You've taken to sleeping with a rag over your mouth. Not because it works, but because it feels like trying. The centipedes don't care. Neither do the ants. They march along the wall in long, coordinated lines, disappearing into cracks and holes you've stuffed with old socks and despair. Some nights you wake up to something crawling across your arm, and by the time you've slapped it away, the welt is already rising. You don't scream. No one does. You just scratch, groan, and try not to imagine what just crawled across your chest. There's no light in the shack after sundown, save for the occasional flicker from the campfires outside. You fall asleep in half-darkness, the room lit just enough to see the shadows move. You listen to the rain as it hammers the tin roof and trickles down the walls. The rhythm is almost soothing until it starts dripping onto your face. Then it's just another reminder that this place doesn't care if you sleep, doesn't care if you wake. It's just holding you for a while until your body stops arguing. And tomorrow, when the bell rings and the sun rises into a sky so hot it feels like punishment, you will sit up in your cot, boots still damp, stomach already uneasy, and wonder, again, how many more nights you'll have to endure this room before your own number comes up. The centipedes will still be there. The cholera might be too, but eventually you won't be. You wake before the sun, though you're not sure you ever truly slept. The bell doesn't ring so much as rattle, dragged along the camp by a man who looks like he's already died once and come back out of spite. You swing your legs over the side of the cot and immediately regret it. The floor is damp. Your socks are still wet from yesterday, or possibly the day before. There's no such thing as dry in this place, only degrees of soggy. Breakfast is exactly what you were promised, which is to say, deeply disappointing. You stand in line outside the mess shack, swatting at flies with the same half-hearted motion everyone else is using. The meal is a tin cup of what someone insists is coffee, though it tastes more like burnt rope water, and 2 hard biscuits that crunch like chalk and reveal a few weevils when you bite into them. You eat them anyway. You don't have the energy to be squeamish, and the protein might be the only thing keeping your legs moving by noon. Your name is called by a foreman who doesn't bother making eye contact. He's got a clipboard and a voice like gravel in a tin can. He hands you a shovel, rusted at the edge and splintered in the middle, and gestures vaguely in the direction of the jungle. You ask for instructions. He mutters something in a language you don't recognize and points again, this time more forcefully. You go. Everyone does. It's not that you know where you're going, it's that it's clear no one cares whether you do or not. The path to the worksite is barely that, just churned up clay slicked with rain and lined with the ghosts of failed wheelbarrows. You pass other crews on the way, men with pickaxes, carts of stone, and wheelbarrows so overloaded you can hear the axles crying. Everyone looks the same, soaked, bent at the waist, faces carved with sweat and mosquito bites. You are not part of a workforce, you are part of a tide. Shovels rise and fall in time with no rhythm. The air smells like diesel fumes and rotting vegetation, and it only gets worse as you approach the cut. They call it the Culebra Cut, though you'll soon hear everyone refer to it as the Hell Trench. It's a massive scar carved through the continental spine, meant to link oceans with brute force. It is not impressive. It is terrifying. The walls loom above you, slick with rain and prone to collapse. Every few days, a landslide kills a dozen men. They bring in more. The mud here isn't like any you've ever seen. It's not just wet dirt. It's alive. It swallows boots whole. It holds on to tools like a jealous lover. You step into it and immediately feel yourself sink past the ankle. You pull your leg up and lose your balance. A man behind you grunts and grabs your arm before you fall. No one says anything. He just keeps walking. You find your assigned spot beside a mound of rocks that someone, somewhere, has decided needs to be moved 6 feet to the left. Why? You're not told. You dig anyway. The shovel bites into the earth with the elegance of a rusted spoon, and each load you lift feels heavier than the last. After 10 minutes, your shirt is plastered to your skin. After 20, you've stopped trying to wipe your face. The sweat pours out of you, like you're leaking. Every time you take a breath, It's like inhaling through a wet blanket that's been soaked in tar. Your supervisor shouts something at you. You glance over and see him waving his arms, red-faced and furious. You don't understand what he's saying, and he doesn't slow down. He storms over, yanks the shovel from your hands, and mimics the motion you're apparently meant to be doing, something between scooping and flinging. You nod, try again, and he walks off muttering about idiots. You repeat the motion for the next several hours, until your arms feel like sacks of gravel, and your back starts sending you polite warnings that it will not be doing this again tomorrow without protest. At some point, a steam shovel rolls into view, belching black smoke and screaming like a dying elephant. It moves 10 feet, scoops a load of mud, and then stalls. The operator curses, hits it with a wrench, and then disappears into the cab. You don't see him again for an hour. The machine stays where it is, blocking your path, leaking fluid that no one can identify. You're told to dig around it. You try, but the ground here is different. Heavier, angrier, like it knows you're losing. Lunch is a tin of salted meat, and a square of something that resembles bread if you squint. You eat sitting on a rock, too tired to talk, watching a line of ants march over your boot like they own it. A man nearby is coughing blood into his sleeve. Another is picking lice out of his collar and flicking them into the mud. No one reacts. There's nothing unusual here. You are not special. You are not even interesting. You are a number with a shovel. When the bell finally rings for the end of shift, your arms no longer feel attached to your body. You drag yourself back through the mud, boots heavy with clay, clothes wet with sweat and rain, and maybe someone else's vomit. You reach the shack just as the sky opens up again and the rain starts pounding. You step inside and feel the warm breath of mildew welcome you home. You lie on your cot and close your eyes, your body already aching in places you didn't know could hurt. You try to remember what it was the letter said about honest work, fair pay, and building the future. You try to believe that any of this matters, but all you can really feel is the heat still radiating from your skin and the mud still caked under your fingernails. You haven't built anything. You've barely survived the day, and tomorrow you'll be asked to do it all again for a trench that will bury you long before it ever connects two oceans. They call it Culebra Cut. Though that name doesn't do it justice, it sounds like something manageable, like a neat trench carved with care and precision. What it really is, though, is a scar on the land, torn open by desperation and held open by force. It stretches for miles through the spine of the isthmus, a gaping wound of rock and clay that refuses to heal. The goal is to cut through it, to tame it, to dig a passage wide enough to carry empires. The reality is that the jungle and the earth are winning. They always have been. On your first day assigned to the cut, the foreman warns you not to stand too close to the slopes. He doesn't say why, but he gestures to a mangled shovel half buried in the mud, and the warning is understood. The walls of the cut are steep, hacked at by dynamite and pickaxe, layered in unstable sediment that doesn't care about your plans. It rains every afternoon, like clockwork, and when it does, the walls sweat and shift, and sometimes fall, not slowly, not gracefully, but all at once. Tons of earth sliding downward, like it's alive and furious. When it happens, it doesn't matter how many men are in the way. They disappear, fast and final, without ceremony. One moment there's shouting and digging, the next it's silence under 20 feet of clay. You're handed a pickaxe and pointed toward a spot that looks identical to every other. Your task is to chip away at rock that barely yields to steel, while balancing on ground that might give out beneath you at any moment. Above you, an old crane swings slowly back and forth, its chains creaking ominously in the wind. No one seems to know if it's supposed to be in use, or if it was just left there after the last collapse. Someone makes a joke about it falling. No one laughs. The only humour that survives here is the kind you whisper when no one else can hear it, the kind that doesn't echo. The mud in the cut isn't like the mud elsewhere. It's deeper, stickier, more malevolent. You step in and feel it pull at you like it knows what you're worth, which is to say, not much. You've seen men lose boots in it and keep working barefoot. You've seen a wheelbarrow vanish mid-shift, swallowed whole. Once, an entire excavator sank into the muck while its operator climbed onto the roof, waving for help. They pulled him out. The machine stayed buried. It's still down there, they say, rusting beneath the surface. One of many mechanical corpses sacrificed to a job that doesn't care how much steel you throw at it. The French tried first years ago with fancy uniforms and imported wine and grand speeches about progress. They built rail lines and hospitals and spent millions. They also died by the thousands. Malaria and yellow fever chewed through their ranks before the jungle even had a chance to get creative. You hear stories about the old French camps, whole towns abandoned overnight, bulldozed by panic and disease. The bones are still out there, just beneath the surface, under layers of vines and bureaucratic optimism. You sometimes wonder if the earth remembers their failure. You know the Americans do. They bring it up constantly, not out of pity, but as a warning. Don't be like the French, they say, as if dying in this place is a matter of national pride. At noon, the dynamite crew begins setting charges farther down the line. There's no warning system, no siren, just a man with a whistle and a stopwatch who occasionally remembers to use both. You're told to move back 30 feet and take cover behind a rock that looks like it's already survived one explosion too many. The blast rattles your teeth and kicks up a cloud of dust that coats everything, including your lungs. For a full minute afterward, you can't hear anything but the ringing in your ears. Someone next to you is bleeding from the arm. You're not sure if it's from the explosion or a falling rock. Either way, he keeps working. The trains that run through the cut are supposed to carry debris out and supplies in, but the tracks shift constantly from rain and soil movement. Derailments are a daily occurrence. You're told not to walk near the rails unless you want to be part of the cleanup. You've seen what a derailed supply train looks like. Splintered wood, twisted iron, sacks of cement split open and melted by the rain. Once, a wagon carrying corpses from the fever wards went off the track and tumbled down the slope. The bodies were half rotted already, and the vultures were waiting. They always are. By the time your shift ends, you've stopped checking your boots for insects. Your hands are raw, and the blisters from yesterday have burst, leaving open patches that sting with every movement. You drag your tool back to the pile where they're stored, or more accurately, thrown. No one maintains them. No one sharpens the blades. You'll use the same pickaxe tomorrow, and it will be worse. You know it. Everyone does. The tools here degrade faster than the men. That night, back in the shack, you lie awake listening to the rain hammering the roof, imagining the walls of the cut sagging in the dark, growing heavy with water and ready to collapse. You picture yourself under that weight, silent, compressed, another missing man on a chart somewhere. And the worst part is that it doesn't seem like a bad way to go. At least it would be quick. At least you wouldn't have to wake up tomorrow and try to move a mountain again. Time loses meaning out here. Days blend together like the sweat running down your back, and no one really bothers counting them. You wake when the bell rings. You dig until your fingers go numb. You collapse in a shack that smells like mildew and death. You do it again. What marks the passage of time isn't a calendar or a sunrise. It's the sound of other men falling apart. You count the days in coughs, in groans, in the moments someone goes quiet and doesn't get back up. Malaria is the first to find you. Not just you, of course. Everyone gets it eventually. It's practically part of the onboarding process. You start to notice the chills at night, the sudden fevers that break like tidal waves across your body. Then come the aches, not muscle soreness from labour, but something deeper, more personal. It feels like your bones are being crushed from the inside out. You sweat through your clothes and your bedding. You can't eat. Your joints throb so badly, you dream of having them removed just for a moment's relief. When you stumble over to the hospital tent, if you can even call it that, you're handed a cup of something bitter and yellow. Quinine, they say. It's supposed to help. You drink it, mostly because there's nothing else to do. It tastes like chemical death and makes your stomach twist. Still, you return to work the next day because there are no sick days here. Not for you, not for anyone on the silver roll. You either work sick or you die sick. That's the choice. Then there's yellow fever. Worse than malaria and infinitely crueler. It doesn't creep in slowly. It hits like a storm. 1 minute you're swinging a shovel, the next your legs give out beneath you. Your skin flushes red, then turns pale. You vomit until your stomach is empty, and then vomit more. Eventually, you start bleeding. From the gums, from the eyes, from places that weren't injured. It's as if your body is trying to eject you from itself. The lucky ones die quickly. The rest waste away until they don't even look human anymore. Just husks in sweat-soaked cots, twitching through their last hours. The hospital for men like you is a long wooden building that used to be a storehouse. They cleared out the crates and nailed some beds to the walls. That's about the extent of their medical preparation. You lie on a straw mattress if there's one available. If not, you lie on the floor and hope no one steps on you. The air inside is thick with fever breath and old blood. There are no curtains, no privacy, and no real doctors. A few orderlies shuffle through, most of them exhausted and sick themselves. They have morphine for the worst cases, but not always. More often it's warm water, vague encouragement, and a Bible if you're still able to read. You hear stories about the American wards, the ones with fans, ice, white sheets, and real medicine. They're for engineers, supervisors, and the men who sign papers. You've never seen the inside of one, but someone says they have mosquito nets that aren't full of holes. You try not to think about it. The idea that comfort is available, just not for you, is worse than the disease itself. It reminds you that this isn't just a fight against nature, it's a system, and you're at the very bottom of it. Other illnesses find their way in, carried on filthy hands and unwashed clothes. Dysentery is always lurking, especially after it rains. A man eats something spoiled or drinks water from the wrong barrel, and suddenly his body turns against him. Within hours he's pale, shaking, and leaking from both ends. If he's lucky, he's carried to the hospital. If he's not, he dies in his cot and is quietly removed before breakfast. You stop asking what happened to the men who disappear in the night. You already know. The real foreman doesn't wear a hat or hold a clipboard. It buzzes. High, constant, just out of reach. The mosquitoes are everywhere. Bed, latrine, ditch, mouth. You can't see the virus they carry, but you feel it hours later. The fever, the nausea, the rattling cough that never leaves. If the shovels don't kill you, the wings will. You learn to live in fear of the smallest things. A scratch on your hand becomes a threat. A blister can turn septic if you don't clean it, and there's never clean water. You keep an eye on your bunkmates, not out of affection but caution. Someone coughing too hard gets edged away from. You pull your blanket tighter at night. Not because it's cold, but because you think it might stop the air from getting in. It doesn't. The fever always finds a way. The graveyard grows steadily, just outside the edge of camp. It's not organised. Some of the plots have stakes with numbers. Most don't. When you pass by, you see fresh mounds of earth and new buzzards circling overhead. They don't even dig that deep anymore. The ground's too wet and the bodies come too quickly. Some mornings, the smell of decay reaches the worksite before you do. You tie a rag over your mouth and keep digging anyway. What else is there to do? Every day you wake up and feel a little worse. Your joints are stiffer. Your skin is thinner. Your breath shorter. But you're still moving. Still dragging yourself through the motions. In this place, that's the only thing that counts. You're not the strongest, not the smartest, not the most skilled. You're just not dead yet. And here, that makes you rare. You don't get paid in money, not real money anyway. You're handed a small pouch at the end of each week, not with coins or bills, but with tokens, stamped metal discs that clink like currency but spend like chains. Each one is marked with the company's name and a number that means absolutely nothing outside the fence line. They call it camp scrip. It looks official, even thoughtful, until you realise you can only use it in one place, the company store. The company store is a squat wooden building near the centre of camp, painted the same sickly shade of grey as everything else. Inside, it's a mockery of civilization. Shelves lined with just enough food and goods to give the illusion of abundance, but not enough to ever feel satisfied. The air smells like dust and dry rot, and the prices are posted with neat chalk lettering that manages to feel smug. A can of beans costs a full day's wages. A bar of soap is half that. If you want something indulgent, like tobacco or a single egg, you might have to skip dinner for 3 nights straight. Bread is stale by the time it reaches the shelf. Fruit is mottled, bruised or half rotten, and the flour is clumpy with bugs. You complain once, just once, and the clerk, a thin man with an unfortunate moustache and a permanent sneer, tells you with a shrug that you're welcome to shop elsewhere. He knows you can't. There is no elsewhere. Everything is owned by the company. The camp, the rations, the water barrels, the housing, and the store. You earn tokens from them, and you spend them with them. They take your labour, sell it back to you, and call it a fair deal. The math is simple and brutal. Your daily wages cover just enough to keep you alive, if you're careful. But you're never just buying food. You need replacement socks. You need something for the blisters on your feet. You need quinine to keep the fever from coming back. One week, you need a new tin mug because yours rusted through. And just like that, you're short. The next week, prices go up because a supply barge was delayed. The clerk shrugs again. Not his fault. Prices fluctuate. You learn that survival depends on routine sacrifice. You start to keep a mental ledger of what you can't afford. It gets longer every day. You stop eating lunch to buy foot powder. You trade your biscuit for a nail brush. You split a bar of soap with 3 other men and argue over who gets the biggest piece. A few try to smuggle things from outside, cheap goods brought in by sailors or Panamanian vendors. But if you're caught, the punishment is swift. Your tokens are docked, your name is marked, and your shackmates suffer guilt by association. Soon no one wants to trade, talk, or even stand near you. Eventually, you fall behind. Everyone does. It's not just you. You work harder, take extra shifts, but the tokens don't stretch any further. You owe more to the store than you earn in a week. They keep a tally. It's handwritten in a little book behind the counter, as if someone might forget how deep in debt you are. You're told it's fine. They'll just deduct it gradually. You won't even notice. And you don't because there's nothing left to notice. You stopped holding on to hope the same week you stopped eating dinner. One day you hear a rumour about a man who tried to walk away. He'd saved up just enough for a train ticket, planned to sneak out at night and vanish into the jungle, then catch a boat at Colon. They found him before he made it past the ridge. The story varies. Some say he was beaten, others that he just vanished. One thing is always the same. He didn't leave. The company doesn't let debts walk away. Not when the workforce is already thinned by disease and accidents. Every man counts, especially those who owe more than they make. You come to understand that this isn't just about survival anymore. It's about control. The tokens are shackles, and the store is your cell. On paper, you're a paid labourer, a proud cog in the machinery of progress. But in reality, you're owned, not in name but in function. You can't leave, can't buy freedom, and can't save up for something better. Everything you earn is already spoken for. Your time, your sweat, your health, all rented back to you at marked up prices with no exit in sight. Sometimes after work you stand outside the store and watch the others file in and out, hollow-eyed, hunched over, clutching their little sacks of tokens like they're worth something. You think about how many shovelfuls of mud it takes to afford a tin of beans. You think about how many days you'll have to dig to afford new boots when these finally fall apart. You think about whether it might be cheaper just to lose your feet. And still, the foreman expects you back at dawn, shovel in hand, boots on, ready to perform the same miserable calculations. The company expects you in line at the store that evening, ration slip in one hand, tokens in the other. And you'll be there, not because you want to be, but because you have no other choice. The store always wins. That's how the system was designed. When the sun sets, the camp doesn't quiet down. It just changes pitch. The metallic clank of shovels is replaced by the distant wail of something. Animal or human, you're not always sure. The jungle doesn't sleep. It seethes. It clicks and hisses and moans in a constant, droning chorus that starts at dusk and crescendos around midnight. The trees don't stand still. They creak and sway even when there's no wind. The leaves whisper and rustle as if something is moving just behind them. Something that doesn't care that you've survived another day. Inside the shack, the air grows heavier, not cooler. It's like lying under wet canvas. The roof traps the heat from the day and radiates it back down at you in waves. Sweat doesn't stop. It just changes texture. Sticky and slow, it pools in the small of your back and behind your knees, soaking into the mattress that already smells like spoiled fruit and iron. You can feel the day still clinging to you. Mud behind your ears, grit under your fingernails, skin rubbed raw where your belt presses. You tell yourself you'll wash in the morning. You told yourself that yesterday too. Your bunkmate scratches himself in the dark. Not the absent-minded kind, but the desperate, frantic clawing of someone who can't bear the feeling of his own skin. You can hear it, flesh against flesh, fingernails scraping like twigs snapping in the underbrush. Occasionally, he curses under his breath. Then he goes quiet for a while, only to start again minutes later. You suspect he's drawing blood, but it's too dark to tell, and too late to care. He's been doing this for nights now. The bites never stop, neither does he. The man on the other side of the room moans in his sleep. Not words, just long guttural sounds, like he's trying to cry, but his lungs have forgotten how. It goes on for hours. No one tells him to stop. No one shakes him awake. He's too far gone for that. Fever dreams have him now. Some nights he talks to someone who isn't there. Other nights he begs in a language no one recognizes. You lie still and try to breathe through your mouth to avoid the sour smell rising from the corner where he's been too weak to reach the chamber pot. There's no such thing as silence. Even when the men stop moving, the jungle fills the void. Frogs belch in the undergrowth. Insects scream in the rafters. Something enormous crashes through the brush every now and then, and no one investigates. You've learned not to look outside. If it's a jaguar, it won't knock. If it's something worse, one of the things people don't talk about, you wouldn't want to see it anyway. Better to pull the blanket over your chest, even if it's soaked, and pretend your cot is a fortress. You try to close your eyes. You try to pretend you're anywhere else. You imagine a bed without bugs, a roof that doesn't leak, air that moves. You try to remember what it felt like to sleep without fear. Real sleep, not this broken, sweaty haze of semi-consciousness. But as soon as your breathing slows, the images come. Not dreams, just memories twisted into something worse. A man slipping in the mud and not coming back up. A hand sticking out from a landslide. The sound of someone dying without anyone bothering to look up. You tell yourself it's just stress, just nerves. But then you start seeing things that never happened. One night, you dream you're still digging. Only the trench is bottomless. And no matter how much earth you move, it never fills. Your hands are gone. Just stumps wrapped in cloth. And yet somehow, you keep digging. You're buried up to your waist and the foreman is laughing. You try to scream, but your mouth is full of mud. Then you wake up, soaked, trembling, heart pounding, only to find your bunkmate watching you with wide, vacant eyes. He doesn't say anything. He just goes back to scratching. The rats come out around 3 in the morning. You can hear them under the floorboards, gnawing at something soft. You pray it's food. You've heard stories. A man with an infected foot, too weak to get up, wakes to find one of his toes missing. Another wakes to find rats in the chamber pot. You don't know if the stories are true, but you believe them anyway. After a few weeks here, everything sounds possible. Eventually, your body forces rest on you. Not sleep exactly, more like a shutdown. Like a machine that overheats and powers down, even if it's still buzzing slightly. You drift in and out, never sure if your eyes are open. You think you hear someone whispering your name, but no one's close enough. You feel something brush your leg, and hope it's just a blanket. Your muscles twitch like they're still trying to dig. Even your dreams are tired. By dawn you haven't rested, no one has. You rise because the bell tells you to, not because you're ready. Your back aches, your mouth tastes like metal, your eyes sting. You feel older than you were yesterday. You swing your legs over the side of the cot, swat at a centipede climbing the wall, and brace yourself for another day in the same sweat-soaked clothes. Outside, the jungle is still screaming. It never stopped. It just lowered its voice while you were trying to sleep. You step out into the steam and realize with grim certainty that sleep is no longer something you get here. It's something that's taken from you. You're told early on that this is an age of industrial miracles. Men from the top of the hill talk about modern equipment and mechanical efficiency, like they're discussing divine gifts handed down by a benevolent god of steel and smoke. You hear the words before you ever see the machines themselves, and by the time you do, your expectations have been shaped by grand promises of progress. What you find instead are beasts, hulking, temperamental, clumsy monsters that eat coal and spit oil. Machines that grind, groan and stall at the first sign of resistance. They don't solve problems, they just add new ones. The steam shovels are the worst offenders. Towering contraptions made of blackened metal and bad intentions. They belch smoke into the sky like chimneys and scream every time they move. In theory, they're supposed to dig faster than 100 men with shovels. In practice, they spend most of the day sitting useless in the mud, waiting for someone to hammer their gears back into alignment. You've watched them spend entire shifts lifting 3 scoops of dirt, only to break down and block the path for everyone else. The operators are often drunk, exhausted, or both, and the machines themselves seem to sense this, responding to commands with stubborn groans and poorly timed spasms. When they do work, they're dangerous. The bucket swings wide and fast, and no one really knows how far it'll go until it's too late. You've seen a man's leg clipped clean by one, and watched another disappear under a falling arm of twisted iron when the pulley snapped. There was no warning, no shout, just the noise of the machine, and then the silence that follows when everyone freezes. The body wasn't found for an hour. When it was, no one was allowed to stop working. They just rerouted the shift and went around the mess. Locomotives run along the temporary tracks laid through the cut and surrounding valleys, hauling dirt, gravel, tools, and sometimes the barely living back to the hospital. But the rails were never meant to last, and the earth they rest on shifts with every rainstorm. Derailments happen constantly. One day, a flatbed loaded with lumber slid off the rails, tipped and crushed a row of wheelbarrows, and the men who happened to be pushing them. Another time, a supply train skidded into a shack after the brakes failed on a slope, slick with clay. 2 men died in their bunks, without ever knowing what hit them. The camp repaired the shack. No one replaced the men. Then there are the cranes, spindly towers with swinging arms meant to lift heavy loads of debris or supplies into the air and deposit them precisely where needed. That's the idea anyway. In reality, they move like drunks in a windstorm. Operators overshoot their marks, drop materials onto carts, tents, even people. The worst is when a chain slips or a counterweight fails. Everything tilts, and the entire structure lists like a ship about to capsize. You've learned to stay far away from them. So have the smarter foreman. Every piece of equipment seems to have its own personality, none of it good. The conveyor belts jam, the drills overheat, the pumps seize up and spit water sideways into trenches that took days to clear. Each repair takes hours, sometimes days, and while you wait, you're expected to keep working around the chaos. No one is paid to sit still, especially not you. If a shovel isn't moving, then a body should be. The real miracle, you start to realize, isn't the technology. It's that anyone still believes in it. That despite all the breakdowns, the crushed limbs, the wasted hours spent waiting for a belt to turn, or a boiler to start, the men in suits still talk about advancement with straight faces. They point to the machines in photographs sent home to newspapers and stockholders and call them triumphs of American engineering. What they don't include in the frame are the grave pits beside the tracks, the blood in the mud, or the labourers digging by hand beside the broken machines that were supposed to make them obsolete. You hear about new equipment arriving from the States, shiny, improved versions of what's already failing. They arrive wrapped in tarps and optimism. Within a week, they're rusting like everything else. The rain doesn't care how much it cost. The mud doesn't care how advanced it is. The jungle breaks steel the same way it breaks bone, steadily and without remorse. Some days you catch yourself thinking it might be easier without the machines at all. Fewer accidents, fewer explosions, less smoke choking the sky, but then you look around and see the piles of rubble, the mountains yet to be moved, the sheer impossible size of what you're expected to carve out of the earth, and you realize that even with the machines, it's hopeless. You were never meant to finish this. You were just meant to keep it going long enough to justify the paperwork. By the time you drag yourself back to camp each night, your ears are still ringing from the pounding of pistons and the screech of metal on metal. You smell like grease and soot, even if you never touch the machines yourself. The sound follows you into sleep when it comes. The rumble of engines, the hiss of steam, the distant crunch of something going horribly, permanently wrong. You lie in bed and try not to think about what fresh piece of equipment will be waiting tomorrow. What new miracle of progress will be handed down with fanfare only to sputter, collapse, or kill. You already know how it ends. The machine breaks, the job doesn't. There are plenty of things in this place that can kill you outright. Fever, landslides, infected blisters, collapsing cranes, but none are quite as insidious or consistent as paperwork. You came expecting disease and danger. You didn't expect that one of the most efficient murderers on the isthmus would be a misplaced form or a misfiled report. Bureaucracy here is not just a nuisance, it is a force of nature. It doesn't bleed, but it causes bleeding. It doesn't dig, but it buries people all the same. You first notice it when your work assignment changes without warning. One morning, you report to the same site you've been on for 2 weeks, only to be told that your name's not on the list anymore. You're supposed to be across camp, helping clear brush near the dynamite crew. You ask who changed it. No one knows. You ask when it changed. No one knows that either. You jog across the trench in the already swelling heat, only to be told you're late and docked half a day's tokens. You learn quickly not to question orders, even when they contradict each other. The foremen carry clipboards filled with forms that may as well be written in disappearing ink. You see them checking boxes, signing names, scribbling notes that mean nothing the moment they're written down. You once watched a supervisor argue with a transport officer over whether a shipment of tools had arrived. They were standing next to the shipment. The crates were right there, labelled and intact. But because the manifest said the tools were pending, no one was allowed to open them. So they sat for 3 days, untouched, while men dug with rusted shovels and broke more than a few bones in the process. Every task has a form. Every tool request, every injury report, every replacement order, every time a man falls into a trench or dies of fever. Sometimes the forms arrive days after the event. Sometimes they don't arrive at all. The camp clerks are buried under stacks of paperwork they don't understand, sent down from offices in Washington, translated through layers of command, passed hand to hand like a game of telephone until the original meaning is meaningless. Meanwhile, someone slips on wet gravel and cracks their skull, and no one brings a stretcher because the request hasn't been properly stamped. Quotas are another problem. You're expected to move a certain amount of rock per shift, measured in cartloads and weight. The numbers are carved in stone, at least they may as well be. It doesn't matter that it rained all night and the soil turned to glue. It doesn't matter that the crane broke again, or that 3 men are out sick with fever. The quota stays the same. If you don't meet it, your name is recorded. Enough missed targets, and you're marked as underperforming, which is one step away from unnecessary. You've heard rumours about underperformers being reassigned to the malaria-infested swamp clearing crews. You've also heard those men rarely come back. Then there's the safety equipment, or rather, the illusion of it. On paper, every worksite is supposed to be inspected weekly. Explosives are supposed to be handled by licensed specialists. Cranes and steam shovels are scheduled for regular maintenance. In practice, none of that happens. You've seen men digging within feet of live wires. You've seen dynamite stored in crates with water damage and half-missing labels. You once watched an inspection team walk past a fractured scaffold, take notes, and move on without stopping. The next day, that scaffold collapsed. 2 men died. The report said they were standing in the wrong place. Decisions are made far away by men who will never see the jungle. Engineers argue in offices over soil compositions and blast calculations while you duck behind rocks, hoping the latest explosion doesn't send a boulder through your spine. Someone on a committee spends 3 days debating how many ounces of dynamite should be used per cubic yard. Meanwhile, the workers are handed outdated instructions and left to guess. When things go wrong, as they inevitably do, it's always chalked up to worker error. The forms are adjusted. The quotas remain. Even rest days are tangled in paperwork. You're told you're eligible for 1 day off every 2 weeks, in theory. But the process requires submitting a written request through your foreman, which must be approved by the site supervisor, then verified by a camp clerk. Half the time, the paper is lost. The other half, you're told the workforce is too short to allow absences. You end up working through it anyway. A man once faked a fever to get out of a shift and was found 2 days later shoveling gravel with a black eye. No one asked questions. They just made sure the next request was misfiled. Some nights, you imagine the offices behind all this. Big wooden desks, ceiling fans, maps of the canal pinned to the walls, with red lines and tidy notes. You wonder if those men know what it smells like when a latrine floods into a sleeping shack. If they've ever had to choose between soap and food. You picture them sipping whiskey, stamping forms with fresh ink, congratulating each other on a job well managed. You wonder how many deaths they've approved without reading the names. You used to think the jungle was your enemy. The heat, the insects, the disease. But those are just tools. The real killer is slow and polite. It wears a tie. It speaks in memos. It thanks you for your service before filing you away under expendable. And by the time it gets around to correcting the mistake that led to your injury or your death, you'll already be gone. Long before you ever stepped off a boat into this stewing pit of heat and death, the French were here. Not these Americans with their schedules and machines and starving labour force, but the old world visionaries, men in cravats and white linen speaking of glory and progress and the greatness of France. They arrived with champagne parasols and a breathtaking lack of practical engineering experience. They looked at the jungle, the swamps and the mountains and declared that it would all bend to willpower and wealth. It didn't. It devoured them. The French effort began in the 1880s, led by the same man who built the Suez Canal, Ferdinand de Lesseps. That was the first mistake, assuming that a canal cut through desert sand would teach you how to carve through volcanic rock and disease-choked rainforest. They brought architects and aristocrats, surveyors and chefs. They built boulevards lined with palm trees, planned out grand housing for engineers, and imported everything from silverware to opera glasses. What they didn't bring were effective drainage systems, mosquito netting, or a realistic sense of what this land would do to them. They chose a sea-level canal, no locks, no lifts, just a clean trench from one coast to the other. Simple, elegant, completely impossible. The terrain didn't cooperate, the weather didn't listen, and the diseases had never even heard of France. Their workers began dying almost immediately. The rain turned construction sites into rivers. The equipment rusted within days. Entire camps were built on swampy ground, breeding mosquitoes by the millions. Within months, malaria and yellow fever had spread faster than any trench could be dug. The death toll climbed into the thousands, and then tens of thousands. Most were labourers from the Caribbean and Central America, forgotten even faster than they were buried. The French handled these setbacks the way bureaucrats always do, with more paperwork and more denial. They sent letters back to Paris filled with optimism and selective numbers. They blamed the climate, the workers, the engineers, anyone except themselves. Meanwhile, hospitals overflowed with the dying, and the jungle crept back over every bit of progress they claimed to make. Their headquarters in Colon was nicknamed the White Elephant, an enormous mansion that stood gleaming above a landscape of rot. It was beautiful and useless, just like the project it represented. They held onto the illusion of control for years. Engineers gave speeches about grit and duty, while the rats chewed through their survey maps. Physicians insisted the fever was caused by bad air, even as men dropped in the streets. The labourers began refusing to show up, and not out of laziness, but self-preservation. You can only watch so many of your friends fall over coughing blood before you start rethinking the value of a daily wage. The French response was to bring in more men, and then more. Eventually, the cemeteries were full. Then the ditches, then the jungle itself. There are remnants of their failure scattered throughout the zone. Crumbling stone buildings covered in vines, rusted railway cars half swallowed by mud, and graves, so many graves, some marked with faded names in elegant script, others nothing more than broken crosses or numbered posts. You've walked past them on the way to your own work site, stepping over what's left of a dream dressed in velvet and lace. Some say there's a valley nearby where the bones still rise during the rainy season, the land rejecting what it was never asked to swallow. The French finally gave up in 1889, after nearly a decade of pouring money and bodies into the canal. Bankruptcy hit first, then scandal. Ferdinand de Lesseps was disgraced, tried for fraud, and sentenced in absentia. Investors rioted in Paris. Back here, the last of the equipment was abandoned, left to rust in the heat. The jungle wasted no time reclaiming it. Within months, the canal zone looked like it had never been touched. Trees grew through train tracks. Termites chewed the blueprints. All that remained was failure, and a handful of marble plaques commemorating it. When the Americans arrived years later, they were smug. They looked at the French ruins and laughed. They told themselves they were smarter, stronger, better equipped. They tore down the French hospitals and burned the old housing. They built their own camps, their own machines, and promised they would succeed where others had died. What they didn't acknowledge was that they'd inherited not just a construction project, but a graveyard. And they were digging through it every day. You learn this history not from books or official briefings, but from whispers in the camp. Older workers pass it down like folklore. They point out old stone foundations, talk about bodies found under new trenches, joke that the ghosts of French engineers still wander the ridge, muttering in disbelief. You don't laugh, not because you believe in ghosts, but because failure feels familiar now. The arrogance, the assumptions, the blind optimism, it's all here again, just with different flags. Sometimes, late at night, you wonder if you're any different. If a century from now, someone else will be standing over your grave, shaking their head at how naive you must have been. You didn't come with champagne or powdered wigs, but you still came believing in a promise. That work meant progress, that suffering meant something, that this canal would make it all worthwhile. But you've seen too many dead men stacked like firewood to believe that anymore. The French were worse, somehow, but that doesn't mean you're winning. There was a time, not that long ago, when you still believed you were here for something. Maybe not glory. No one with a shovel and a shack ever truly dreams of glory, but purpose at least. You believed that if you worked hard enough, kept your head down, and outlasted the worst of it, you might get something in return. A wage that could buy you a future, a letter home saying you'd helped build the impossible, even just a ticket out. Now you don't even believe in breakfast. The priests used to visit the camps once a week. They'd show up in sweat-stained collars, hand out leaflets, offer communion, and mumble prayers about endurance and salvation. Most of the men didn't listen, but it made the place feel tethered to something beyond itself. Like someone still remembered there were souls here, not just bodies. Then the visits became less frequent, the sermons shorter. Eventually, they stopped altogether. Rumour says the last priest died of fever on the road between camps. Another rumour says he simply boarded a boat and left. Either way, no one replaced him. The newspapers stopped coming not long after. At first they were only late, delayed by weather or ships or some scheduling mishap. Then they were weeks behind. Then months. Now no one even expects them. A paper arrives once in a while, tattered and water-stained. The headline's already outdated. Men crowd around it anyway, pretending that knowing what happened last season in New York or Paris will make their ribs hurt less. You glance at the pages and realise you've forgotten how to care. The world outside doesn't feel like yours anymore. It's just noise on paper. Mail is the same. You wrote letters home at first, even if you weren't sure they'd reach anyone. You talked about the heat, the work, the progress you hoped to see. You held back the worst of it. Everyone did. No one wants to worry their family. But as time wore on, the letters got shorter. Then they stopped. You don't know if anyone wrote back. You don't ask. You don't check. The postmaster hasn't been sober in weeks. And the mailbags sit unopened beneath a tarp that's starting to sprout mould. People still leave the camp, but not for the reasons you'd hope. Resignations are rare. The paperwork alone is enough to stop most men from trying. But suicides, those happen more often now. Quietly, sometimes. A man wanders into the jungle at night and doesn't come back. Other times, it's loud. A man throws himself under a loaded cart or drinks something he shouldn't. The worst is when they hang themselves in the latrine stalls. You don't go in there alone anymore. No one does. The camp doesn't talk about it. Death by fever is reported. Death by accident is recorded. Death by choice is ignored. The clerks don't log it, the foremen don't speak of it, and the other men pretend not to notice the extra space in the bunkhouse. It's easier that way. Less paperwork, less explanation. It's like they were never here. After all, there's always someone new to take the spot. You begin to forget what year it is. At first you blame the heat, the fatigue, the constant noise of insects drilling into your brain. But then you realise you genuinely don't know. You count the months by the number of floods, the number of cholera outbreaks, the number of men buried behind the tool shed. Your birthday passes without recognition, and you feel strangely relieved. One less thing to remember. One less thing to miss. The other men are no better. You used to play cards in the evening, smoke rolled cigarettes, swap stories about the lives you left behind. Now the bunkhouse is mostly quiet. Conversations are short, jokes are rare. You know which men are planning to leave by the way they sit during dinner. Shoulders tense, eyes darting toward the horizon. You also know they won't make it. Not because they lack courage, but because there's nowhere to go. Not without money, not without papers, not without something more than tired bones and debt to show for it. You used to dream of a better life, a dry bed, a small house, enough to eat. A place where the ground didn't shift under your feet, and the air didn't taste like rust and rot. But those dreams have faded. Now you dream of sleep that doesn't end with coughing blood into your pillow. You dream of waking up without a fever pounding behind your eyes. You dream of forgetting the sound of a man dying 2 feet from your cot. Most nights, you wake before dawn, drenched and shaking, heart racing from something you can't quite name. There are men who still talk about finishing the canal. They believe it will all be worth it, that their names will be written in history, etched into plaques, remembered. You don't argue with them. You just nod and go back to your shovel. You know the truth. This canal will be built on your body, not your legacy. And when it's done, no one will speak your name. What little hope remains in this place isn't held by the workers. It's hoarded by the engineers, the overseers, the men in white hats who don't sweat. They keep it in locked rooms with clean water and fresh sheets. Down here, in the heat and filth, you survive out of habit, not purpose. Morale isn't something you lose all at once. It leaks out slowly, like blood from a bad wound. You don't notice until there's nothing left. There are only a few ways to leave the canal zone, and most of them involve a shovel and a hole. Some men still talk about finishing their contracts, about boarding ships home, even about saving up enough to start a new life in the north. You nod when they speak, because it's kinder than the truth. You've seen the ones who leave. They don't walk up the gangplank with money in their pockets and smiles on their faces. They're wheeled out on carts, wrapped in canvas if they're fortunate enough to be removed at all. If you're lucky, someone finds your body before the vultures do. The birds know the schedule better than the clerks. They circle the camps at dawn, drift over the cut by midday, and settle on rooftops by evening. When a man collapses by the tracks or drowns in the muck, they're the first to know. Sometimes they're waiting before the body cools. Other times, they bide their time until the rats lose interest. The jungle is generous with its scavengers. The burial process, if you can call it that, is functional. A shallow trench dug behind the hospital or behind the shacks, wherever there's still space and no standing water. The soil is so wet you don't need a coffin. Just roll the body in and cover it before the rain washes it out again. A wooden plank might be placed at the head, marked with a number, and nothing more. Worker number 8731. Silver roll, unknown. Labourer, black. Names are a luxury. Names require someone to remember you, and most of the men who might have are already gone too. You've seen the grave pits. Everyone has. Some are mass burials, filled during one of the cholera waves when bodies came faster than shovels could dig. Others are solitary, dug for men who were important enough to merit individual holes. No one weeps, no one stands watch. The only sound is the thud of dirt on wood, and then silence as the living return to their tasks. There is always more work to do. Morning is not on the schedule. Some men vanish without a trace. One moment they're there, coughing beside you at breakfast, and the next, they're gone. Maybe they wandered off into the jungle. Maybe they collapsed into a trench and were buried by accident, or on purpose. Maybe they were never here in the first place, at least not officially. The paperwork gets muddled. Names are misspelled, nationalities swapped, arrival dates lost. Entire identities dissolve in the heat. You begin to wonder if yours could too. There's a morgue near the edge of the zone, though calling it that suggests more dignity than it deserves. It's a lean-to with shelves made of warped planks and a roof that leaks. Bodies are stacked and catalogued, often incorrectly, until someone from the burial crew gets around to hauling them off. In the dry season, the smell carries for miles. In the rainy season, it seeps into the mud, into the walls, into your skin. You try not to think about it when you eat. You fail more often than not. Repatriation is a myth. The idea that your body might be sent home is something they tell new arrivals to make them feel civilized. The cost alone, makes it impossible for most. The company isn't going to pay to ship you back across the ocean when it's cheaper to dig a hole and forge a signature. If your family asks, they'll receive a letter saying you died of natural causes and were respectfully interred. No mention of the vultures, no mention of the number on the stake. You've watched men try to leave before the inevitable. They limp to the administrator's office, feverish, trembling, begging for discharge. Some are granted passage, usually after enough threats or bribes. Most are told to rest and return to work when they're better. A week later, someone's folding their blanket and scrubbing out their cot. You don't ask what changed. You already know. The ones who make it out alive leave with nothing. No savings, no letters of recommendation, no health. They walk differently, hunched, hollow-eyed, skin discoloured from years of sun and medicine and hunger. You saw one man board a steamer with a wooden leg and a pack made of a rice sack. He didn't look back. No one waved goodbye. Everyone else just turned back to their tasks and kept shoveling. You used to imagine your own departure, boarding a ship, holding a small bag of belongings, feeling the deck sway beneath your feet as you sailed away from the heat and the stink and the rot. Now, when you think of leaving, it's horizontal, rolled in canvas, tagged by a clerk who spells your name wrong, dropped into the same trench as the last dozen men who coughed themselves to death in their bunks. The worst part isn't dying, it's knowing that when you do, the work won't stop. The next man will take your shovel. The next name will be added to the roster. The machine will keep grinding, fed by bodies, fueled by silence, and then one night, the machine grinds you under too. You died the way most men did here, quietly in the dark, without warning or ceremony. A fever in the night, a breath that didn't come back, a stillness no one had the energy to question. Your body was found just before dawn, eyes half open, hands clenched in the sheet. They wrapped you, tagged you, buried you. That was it. One day, after you're already gone, the digging stops. The silence feels unnatural, like the world has skipped a beat. There are still carts to push, still rails to repair, still shovels to swing, but the endless carving, the collapsing trenches, the dynamite blasts that made your bones rattle every afternoon, they're over. It's not a celebration exactly. No one dances, no one sings. The camp doesn't erupt in joy. It just sort of pauses, as if the machine that chewed through decades and men has finally run out of hunger, or at least moved on to someone else's bones. The Americans declare it a triumph. Newspapers in faraway cities print pictures of smiling engineers in crisp white suits, standing proudly beside maps and flags. There are speeches, parades, toasts raised in boardrooms full of men whose hands have never touched a shovel. They call it the greatest engineering feat of the modern age. The world watches as the first ship makes its way from ocean to ocean. Cameras flash, dignitaries wave. Somewhere a band plays. You're not mentioned, your name is not printed, no one reads out your number or your origin or your cause of death. There is no plaque listing the men who died in the dirt, who bled into the soil that was shipped away in carts. The workers, the thousands upon thousands who made the canal possible, exist only as a statistic, rounded down for convenience. Even that number is debated. Some say 25,000, others say over 50. No one agrees, no one really wants to. It's easier not to count what you've already thrown away. The ship glides past where you once worked. If you could see it, if your eyes still functioned, if your lungs still moved, if your bones hadn't been folded into the muck beneath the tracks, you might not recognize what they've built. The canal is clean now, smooth controlled. The jungle has been pushed back, at least for now. The locks gleam in the sun. The water flows with obedient precision. No one slips in the mud. No one coughs blood into their palm between shifts. The suffering has been scrubbed from the surface, like soot from a white shirt. They built statues, but not for you. They raised monuments for presidents, engineers, and administrators. Men with titles, men with signatures. They named buildings after financiers. They wrote books about foremen. Your legacy is a half-collapsed shack, a rusted shovel buried under vines, and a grave that even the vultures forgot how to find. Somewhere in a government archive, there may be a record with your number on it. It might say deceased, it might say missing, it might say nothing at all. The ones who survived didn't walk away whole. You've seen them, the lucky ones. They made it out with missing fingers, failing lungs, and haunted eyes. They took jobs as porters, janitors, dockhands. They moved boxes in cities that didn't care where they'd been. They never talked about the canal, not because they were ashamed, but because no one asked. The world wasn't interested in the price of progress, only in the result. And this was the result. A shortcut for commerce, a highway for empire, a neat red line on a map that made rich men richer and warships faster. All that death, all that mud, all that rot for a more convenient way to move bananas and battleships. They say it changed the world. Maybe it did. It just didn't change yours. What would have happened if you had lived? If you had survived the fevers, the cave-ins, the backbreaking shifts and impossible quotas? Would you have walked along the finished canal with pride? Would you have pointed and said, "I helped build that"? Or would you have looked into the water and seen the reflection of every man who didn't make it, every body dropped in a trench and forgotten the moment the next shift began? The truth is the canal ended. You didn't. You were undone, piece by piece. First your skin, peeling from the sun, then your lungs, full of steam and smoke, then your hope, drained slowly until there was nothing left but obedience. When your body finally gave out, there wasn't enough of you left to bury properly. Just meat and memory. Just another name no one will say out loud. Still the world spins. Ships pass through the water you helped dig, their wakes rippling across the surface, oblivious to the bones below. Tourists snap photos, workers polish railings, politicians tour the locks and declare the project a symbol of international cooperation. They pose with hard hats and forget to mention that most of the original builders never even had shoes. You weren't a hero. You weren't even a worker, not really. You were a resource, something to be used up. And when you were used up, you were discarded. You're not part of history. You're part of the foundation. And no one remembers the foundation once the monument is finished. But now the digging is done. The jungle is quiet again. The graves have settled. The canal is open. And somewhere, beneath a patch of grass and a number scratched into wood, the last part of you lies still. That brings us to the end of tonight's story. Not of innovation or achievement, but of 1,000 lives ground down beneath someone else's progress. If you're still awake, thank you for drifting through a world where sweat was cheap, names were optional, and history was written from the top of the hill, never the bottom of the trench. If you'd like early access to more stories like this, ad-free audio of the episodes, or just want to support the show, there's a link to the Patreon in the description. You can also like, subscribe, or leave a comment about which quiet horror you'd like unearthed next. And if you're listening on a podcast app, a rating or review helps others find these stories. Sleep well.